Since he took office back in 2001, DeKalb County voters have approved 2 bond issues totaling some $220 million for green space purchases and park development. Congratulations to you for that, because that's quite a feather in your cap. Tell me how you did it. Keys to success.
Well, first of all, it's a quality of life issue. People want to see preservation of green space and open space, the protection of wildlife. At the same time, including with passive parks, but more recreational facilities, expanding the ball fields. And so we were very excited. We were able to put together a group of people, focus groups that included citizens, and we talked about the issue. And then we came forth with some ideas on how we could get the money to address that critical need. We were plagued by developers that was literally wiping out our trees and destroying our natural wildlife and things of that nature. And so with this bond initiative, we were able to get it passed almost 3-1 by the voters, and at the same time it gave us the money so we can start to acquire the land, because the availability of land was quickly declining and the cost of land was quickly increasing. And so we were able to get ahead of it, and we've already preserved about 2,700 acres of land through our projects.
Very good. I would assume that the public education on the front end is really what drove the success in the
Absolutely.
back end.
Getting people involved, getting neighbors involved on the front end, educating them on how much it's going to cost, what we'll be able to do. The money is only earmarked for land acquisition and park development. So they knew where their money was going to go, they knew what it was going to cost them, and at the same time they can see, feel it, walk on it, play with it,
walk their dog
and
through
walk
it.
their dog. And so, you know, they felt comfortable with it, and they were willing to invest in DeKalb's future in terms of land and parks.
And you had one in 2001 and a second bond
In
referendum in
2005.
2005. So you actually were able to show then the progress you could make, and I'm sure that made the second referendum a little easier.
Well, the first one was so critical to preserve land right then and there. So 70% of it was dedicated strictly to land acquisition, 30% for parks development. Well, after we purchased a lot of the land, the second bond initiative was geared more with about 60% of it towards parks development and the remainder towards land acquisition. So we wanted to balance that off. We wanted to go out and protect land and preserve land, but we wanted to also go out and improve our existing parks, expand them, and have various types of recreational activities, including we're building our first indoor aquatic center in DeKalb County, and our first skateboard park in DeKalb County. So we're happy about that. We're busy. And
He's doing a great job, huh?
A very good job. And what we've found from our work with local governments around the country is a very well articulated and clear bond referendum has a better chance of passing. And in fact, in 2006, in the November elections, $6.4 billion of money was approved for land conservation around the country in over 140 jurisdictions. Excellent. And that's testament to the fact that citizens and governments work together on crafting a really clear message to the voters that obviously has success. And also, when you mentioned about the second go-around, the second time you go back to the voters, it may seem easier, but you have to have a success story built upon your first go-around. And if you've shown from your careful management of the funds from the first bond measure that you are indeed delivering on what you promised, the voters will respond. But you still have to be mindful of the fact you have to articulate the need and what your goal is going to be.
But I tell you what's interesting, the partnership between DeKalb County and the private partners and TPL and others, because in many cases they were able to put a contract, if you will, on land, hold it for us until we got the resources we can come and acquire it from them. So that was a big help in many regards.
Briefly explain so that our viewers understand, how does the Trust for Public Land go about protecting green space?
We go about a variety of ways. One is we work with jurisdictions on developing what we call a conservation vision, which is, we also call it a green print, where you look at different attributes and different priorities of a jurisdiction and map it. And then you can determine where the green space needs are and identify properties for acquisition. We also work with jurisdictions during their bond referendum, where they actually are putting together the language and putting together the vision and the prioritization of projects, and help them work on that aspect as well and support that measures during the voting process or the election process. We then go out and work with the jurisdictions once that money is available or once the bond has passed, look at their prioritization list, work with them and saying, what are your target properties? How can we help you? And as Vernon said, we can go out and put contracts on properties ahead of the money, and one of the benefits, knowing it's coming.
How do you go about prioritizing? Let's start with the county. How does the county decide which land it needs and why?
Well, if you look at DeKalb County, we're sort of diverse. One part of the county, there's very few land that's available. If there is something available, it's maybe an acre here or a half acre there. So we recognize by establishing what we call, again, pocket parks, we can buy these little small tracts that can give the neighborhoods their own almost individual little park there. But at the same time, on the other part of the county, where the last open land is, you can find anywhere between 20 and 200 acres of land. So we wanted to make sure that we were taking care of those communities that were already developed and having pocket parks, but at the same time preserving a lot more of the acreage that runs along the South River, for example. And at the same time, Arabia Mountain, where we've acquired more land around Arabia Mountain, which is now, we worked hard through Washington, the lobbying over 5-6 years, where it's now been declared a National Heritage Area. And that gives us about $1 million a year, and it's reauthorized every 10 years. That puts us on the National Register with Yellowstone Park. That brings visitors and tourists along.
Is there a way to place a value on green space and really determine how it impacts the bottom line?
Yeah, let me give you an example. Central Park, when they preserved that land years and years ago, someone thought it was a stupid idea, but now that is the crown jewel of that community. If you live around Central Park, you live in a very expensive neighborhood. Why? Because of that quality of life jewel that's there. When you look throughout DeKalb County and other jurisdictions, there are developers who are chopping at the bits to get access to a lot of this property because it's in prime locations. And each year it increases more and more in value. It makes a community, it makes a neighborhood, it makes for that true quality of life, the mixture, residential development. You have your residential, your commercial, and you have your recreational, if you will, and your passive parks. You know, there's two different types of parks too. You have your recreational, but you have your passive. And so
and people want both.
They want both, and it's very valuable.
And a lot of times they're combined. I know Gwinnett County has done a particularly good job. I have some kids who play baseball, and I've been to many of the parks, and they've done an amazingly good job of putting baseball fields next to dog parks, next to walking trails, and done quite a good job.
But you talk about putting a value on parks and green space. I mean, what we're seeing now is studies coming out showing the health benefits of parks. And if you look at the latest statistics on the number of children who are facing the problem of obesity, it's critical that we have places for children to recreate. Growing up in the 1960s, we had backyards without fences. We ran around, we rode our bicycles all day long. Today, I think the children have a different environment in which they're growing up in, and they need places they can go and play. And that's what I think the benefit will be, is you look at creating parks, whether they're smaller parks or jungle gyms or whatever you call them, places for kids to play, it's healthier for them. Also, when you look at green space acquisition out in the more suburban counties where you're preserving areas around the watersheds, it's not just the benefit of preserving the trees and the green space, but also has water quality and water quantity benefits as well. And those need to be quantified, I think, as well as just the physical aesthetics.
The public is in favor of green space. A lot of individual landowners seem to be coming forward if they feel so compelled. But developers still feel like there's a mixed bag. Some much more conscientious, and others maybe still need to go through a cultural change, if you will.
Well, let me tell you, many of them were perhaps on the road to Damascus and got knocked off the donkey. They realize now that preservation and parks and green space as a part of their overall development is a major selling point. Initially, they were all, well, you're taking my land away from me.
I could put a few more homes there, or condos there.
More homes, but they can increase the price on the homes that they're selling, and by having that aspect to it. Through our own initiatives, we have passed legislation, conservation legislation, if you will, for developments. The more land they preserve, the more we give them density, if you will. That has helped a lot. If you look at our streams and our buffers now, when a developer comes in there, it used to be a 25-foot borderline or buffer. Now it's increased to 75 feet. Well, what does that do for us? That saves more of that land. It prevents those homes potentially from flooding, but at the same time, it helps us with the wildlife on that corridor where that stream runs, because there's now more land set aside. So, but
and less concrete.
Again, less concrete. Yeah.
Very good.
And you know, one final point too. I grew up on a farm, and there are many elected officials like myself who come from a background where you had a farm, you had appreciation for the wildlife and natural resources, and as more and more of us get elected to public office, we're willing to carry that mantle too. And so clearly that's what it was on my part. It was a part of my growing up, and it made something, it gave me a whole new sense of appreciation. That's why it's so important to preserve it for future generations.